must be wondering, right? If not for those words, would Wahyu Dian Silviani still be alive today? As a lecturer at State Islamic University, Radin Mas Said Surakarta, Dian Silviani almost realized her lifelong dream, a scholarship to pursue a doctoral degree in England. She was known for her intelligence, her love of the environment, and her strong loyalty to her friends. However, just because of a reprimand, it turned into a nightmare. Her life was taken not by a stranger, but by a man who was working on her house. As the old saying goes, your mouth is your tiger. I'm Lady, and this is Under the Sandalwood Tree, where we delve into the darkest side of human nature and ask, what is the true value of a sentence? Imagine her as a young girl from Madarum, the daughter of a distinguished professor, her mind already buzzing with questions the world couldn't yet answer. She wasn't just a scholar, she was a dreamer who saw beauty in a chemistry lab and a future in a foreign land. She graduated from the University of Madarum in 2011. A testament to her local roots, but the world was her classroom. She crossed oceans to pursue her master's at Macquarie University in Australia, returning home with a sharper mind and a broader perspective. Dian Silviani was more than just a State Islamic University lecturer. She was a beacon of intellectual curiosity, a person who had spent her entire life chasing knowledge and building a better future, brick by brick, until a single act of violence shattered it all. She was a builder, not with bricks and mortar, but with minds. When she came to State Islamic University Radin Mas Said in 2020, first as a probationary civil servant, and then as a permanent lecturer in 2021, she wasn't just taking a job, she was planting a seed. Her colleagues said she was the one they counted on to pioneer a new environmental science program, a testament to her dedication to a world she believed could be better. She was the one who could bridge the intellectual rigor of an Australian master's degree with the humble task of sorting waste, a woman who saw no difference between a lecture hall and a garbage pile if it meant building a cleaner future. She was known to her students as a beacon of humility and grace, a person so gentle that her friends insisted she had no enemies. And in the end, it was not an enemy, but a simple man, a builder of walls, who brought her vibrant, purposeful life to a violent, final stop. And so, in the middle of the night, at 1 a.m. on August 24, 2023, the world continued to turn. A new kind of darkness enveloped a house in Gatak, Sukoharjo. While Wahyu Dian Silviani, a woman who had traveled the world and touched countless lives, slept soundly, another figure stirred. He was a 23-year-old construction worker named Dwi Ferianto, a man whose hands were made to shape and repair, not to destroy. However, in a quiet house, under the cover of darkness, he had other plans. Those plans were not about saving lives at all, but about taking them out of anger, out of cold, calculating desire. This was not a crime of opportunity. It was a crime of premeditation, where the life of an intelligent and compassionate woman was deemed worth less than a few words uttered in a fit of irritation. And in that moment, the world lost a ray of light so that a shadow might grow just a little heavier. But the story, as all good crime stories do, begins much earlier. It began not with a scream, but with a hammer and a nail. It began with a simple, ordinary transaction, a woman with a vision for her home and a young man hired to build it. On July 31st, 2023, Wahyu Dian Silviani welcomed DeLuis Ferianto into her life, not as a threat, but as a helper, a man whose hands were meant to construct a new wall or mend a leaky roof. She saw in him only what she wanted to see, a laborer hired to transform her space, a stranger she treated with kindness and trust. She couldn't have known that in those quiet days of renovation, as he worked on her house, a more sinister plan was also being constructed inside his head, slowly and methodically, brick by brick, leading to the night when the house he was hired to build became the tomb of the woman who hired him. And then came the words that sealed her fate. It happened on a Monday, August 21, 2023, a day like any other, as DeLuis Ferianto worked alone, meticulously laying bricks to raise a wall. She walked up to him, her voice a sharp contrast to the quiet scraping of mortar. She looked at his work, a creation of his own hands, and called him an amateur. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you even have a brain?" It was a fleeting moment, a few careless words from a woman who had a PhD in her sights and a world of knowledge in her head. But to him, those words were not just a critique of his craftsmanship. They were an indictment of his entire existence, a final crushing blow to a man who had already come to believe he had nothing. In that moment, the beautiful life she had built and the magnificent future she was working towards became the thing he wanted to tear down. The victim kept at it. A woman with a head full of degrees and a mouth full of insults, she laid into him again and again. Each word was a little hammer, tapping away at a man who already felt like a broken thing. She didn't have to hit him. Her words did the job just fine. She told him he was no good, that his hands were useless, that his mind was empty. He stood there and took it, a silent wall of a man, while the bitterness built up behind his eyes. It was a simple thing, really. Not a matter of right or wrong, just a matter of cause and effect. A woman with too many words and a man with too little. The insults were her weapon, and the hate that curdled in his gut became his. The rest, as they say, was just a matter of time. That night, he didn't sleep. The words had done their work. They bounced around inside his head, sharp as broken glass. He saw the face, heard the tone, and every time the bitterness swelled up a little more. A simple truth settled in his mind. Her words had taken his dignity, so he would take her life. There was no rage, no fire, just a cold, quiet certainty. It was an even trade in his mind. The plan was a simple one, sketched out with the same detached logic a man might use to build a wall. He knew the house. He knew she was alone. He knew what she had said. The rest was just a matter of waiting for the right kind of darkness. He came back that night around 10. The grudge was a live thing in his gut, and it had a job to do. He went to the housing complex where she lived, a place of quiet streets and neat houses. The plan was simple enough, a clean line from thought to action. But a man can't account for everything. The streetlights spilled across the entrance, and there they were, a couple of men on night patrol. Ordinary men doing an ordinary job with their flashlights and their bored looks. They were just standing around, killing time. But for a man with murder on his mind, they were a wall he couldn't get around. So he turned around and walked away. The grudge didn't go anywhere. It just sat there, waiting for another chance, when the streets were a little darker and the neighborhood watch was nowhere to be found. The next night, he came back with a knife. It was a simple, ugly thing pulled from a kitchen drawer, the kind of tool a man uses to cut a wire or open a package. But tonight, it had a different job. The grudge was still there, sitting heavy in his mind, and the memory of her words was fresh. He got to the same street corner, the same entrance to the same quiet housing complex. The clock showed 11, but there they were again, the men on patrol, killing time in the dark with their flashlights and their slow talk. The streets were too well lit, and their presence was a cold fact he couldn't get around. The knife stayed in his pocket. A man can only do so much when the world keeps getting in the way. He walked home, the blade a useless piece of steel against the stubborn will of ordinary men. It was Thursday, August 24, a little after midnight. The third time's the charm, they say, and for some men, it's the truth. He put on a green hoodie and a blue jeans, the kind of clothes a man wears when he doesn't want to be noticed. The knife was in his pocket, a cold lump of steel that had been waiting for its moment. He walked from his house the same path as before, a 2-day habit of failure. But this time was different. The streets were quiet. No night watch, no bored men with flashlights. The world was dark and empty, just the way he wanted it. It was a clear path from his front door to hers, a path that led to a small, quiet house where a woman with a brilliant mind was sleeping, unaware that her time had finally run out. He got to the gate and kept walking. The street was quiet, dead silent, the kind of silence that has a sound of its own. He moved like a ghost, his shadow long and thin under the faint glow of the streetlights. The houses looked the same, but he knew which one he was looking for. It was beside the one he had worked on, the one he had put his hands on, brick by brick. The windows were dark. The woman inside, the one who had a name for everything, didn't have a name for the thing that was walking up her street. A quiet man in a green hoodie with a grudge tucked away in his pocket. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. And the time was now. He came to the house and didn't bother with the front door. A man like that knows the easy way in. He put his hands on the front wall and went over it, silent as a cat in the dark. He climbed onto the roof, moving to the back where the shadows were deep and the streetlights couldn't reach. A house is a lot of things, but mostly it's a series of locked and unlocked doors. And in the back of this one, he saw what he was looking for, a door made of light steel and a flimsy wire screen. It was an invitation, plain and simple. The kind of thing a person leaves open when they've never had to worry about what might come in from the dark.
found his way down. The bathroom window frame was a good handhold, and he used it to slide himself down the wall. His feet scraped against the concrete, a quiet sound that no one heard. He moved without hurry, the way a professional does. He landed on the floor of the drawing room, a place for clean clothes and sunlight. It was a simple transition from the dark outside to the deeper dark inside. The air was still. The house, like a sleeping woman, was unaware of the new company it had just received. The last door was open, and the rest was just a matter of walking. He went through the house like a ghost. The floor was cool under his feet, and the air was still and quiet. A single ray of moonlight cut through a window, laying a pale line across the living room floor. And there she was. She was sleeping soundly, a woman in a deep, peaceful sleep, on a mattress in the middle of the room. Her body was a soft line, curled on her side. A cream-colored shoulder bag lay next to her, a small, innocent thing that held her money and maybe her dreams. He looked at the bag. He looked at the woman. The plan was still the same. The motive hadn't changed. But in the quiet darkness, with the smell of sleep in the air, a new kind of silence settled in the room, the kind that comes just before the end of the world. He moved in on the bag, a cream-colored thing hanging there like a piece of quiet luggage. He opened it and found a wallet. Inside was a couple of 100,000 rupiah. Not much, not enough to kill for, but enough for him. He took the money and tucked it into his back pocket, a neat transaction in the dark. Then he saw the phone, sitting next to her on the mattress, a little black rectangle of a thing. He took that too and put it in the pocket of his hoodie. 2 simple acts, a few bills and a phone. The woman slept through it all, her breathing soft and even. A woman who had crossed oceans and had a world of plans, now had her life's worth measured in a handful of cash and a stolen phone. The whole thing was clean, quick, but it wasn't over. The money was in his pocket. The phone was in his hand. The job was done, but the grudge was still there, sitting cold in his mind. He pulled the knife from its makeshift cardboard sheath. It wasn't about the money anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about the words she had used, the look on her face. He moved fast, a quick, ugly arc of steel. The blade found its mark on the left side of her neck. A sound came out of her, a low, pained groan that cut through the quiet. Then the word, just one, help. The word hung in the air for a second, a sound without an answer, and then the quiet came back, darker than before. He put his hand around her throat. The question was a low sound in the dark. Still want to live or not? He let up for a second, a moment of silence that was a mistake. She took a breath and screamed the word again, a desperate cry that clawed at the quiet. Help! Help! He didn't have to think about it. The knife went into her cheek, a quick, ugly strike. The scream stopped. The world went silent again, a heavy, final kind of quiet. The woman who had a million words was all out of them, and the man who had only a few was finally done talking. She was a fighter.
Even with a blade in her neck and another in her face, she didn't just lie there. She clawed at him, trying to get the knife. Her fingernails left a red mark on his inner thigh, a small piece of evidence in the dark. But it wasn't enough. He was stronger, and a man with a purpose is always stronger than a woman with just a hope. He overpowered her, and the struggle ended as quickly as it had begun. The knife went into her chest once, a clean, final stroke that took the last breath out of her. The fighting was over. The house was quiet again, and this time it stayed that way. He pulled the knife out of her chest. The job wasn't done yet, not in his mind. He wanted to make sure. He put the blade back in, a final thrust into her right cheek, the steel going clean through to the inside of her neck. He held it there. Held it until the last flicker of life was gone, until her body was just a piece of meat on the floor. He didn't rush. He didn't have to. The house is quiet, and she wasn't going anywhere. He watched her until she stopped moving, until the stillness was a final, undeniable fact. Then he pulled the knife out for the last time. It was over. He took the mattress off the floor and put it on top of her. A simple act, covering a terrible thing. Like a man putting a blanket on a piece of furniture. Then he went to the bathroom. The blood on his hoodie sleeve was a detail he had to handle. He turned on the water and washed it away, watching the red mix with the white foam and disappear down the drain. It was just a thing that had happened, a problem that needed a solution. The woman was gone, the mess was gone, and the quiet was back. The job was finally done. There was nothing left to do but leave. He went to the main door and locked it from the outside. The click of the lock, a small, final sound in the quiet house. The key felt heavy in his hand, a small piece of metal that now held the key to a sealed tomb. He didn't walk out the front door. He went back to the front wall, put his hands on the cold stone, and climbed over it just as he had come in. He disappeared into the night, a shadow among shadows, leaving behind a locked house and a secret it would keep until the sun came up and a new kind of hell was unleashed on the quiet street. It was a neat crime, planned in the quiet dark and executed with the cold logic of a blueprint. The result was just as he had planned. Her body was found, a final piece of evidence in a room that held a terrible story. The paper from the hospital, the Visum et Repertum from Dr. Mawardi Surakarta, dated August 30th, didn't have much to say. It just confirmed the facts. The woman, the one with the big plans and the sharp words, was dead. It was a simple case of a man with a grudge and a woman who became a problem. Nothing more, nothing less. The story of a dead woman and a man who killed her wasn't a long one. The sun came up and the world went back to being a place where things were found and things were solved. It took the cops less than 12 hours. The body was in a house in a quiet housing complex in Temple, just like the report said. It was her place, and the man who killed her was a local, a name on a piece of paper. Dwi Ferianto, a resident from the same village. The great mystery of her death was over before the coffee got cold. It wasn't a grand puzzle for a genius mind. It was a simple equation. A dead woman, a grudge, and a man who was stupid enough to think he could get away with it. The big surprise wasn't a surprise at all. He was the kind of guy she hired to fix a broken window or build a new wall. A familiar face, a man who saw her house in the sunlight and came back to it in the dark. The city was a big place, but a grudge made it small. It made her house and his a short walk, a quick trip from one place to another. The killer wasn't some stranger from a different town. He was a neighbor. He was a man who knew the house he was hired to build and the woman who lived in it. The facts were all there. The dead woman, the man who killed her, the knife, the motive. It all went to the court. The prosecutor had a simple case, and the law had a simple name for it. Article 340 Criminal Code. But one for a man who plans his work and works his plan. The judge in the Socorro District Court looked at the evidence and looked at the man. He didn't have to think twice. The gavel came down, and with it came the final word. A life sentence. A man who had lived for 23 years was now given a life with no end, all because of a few careless words and a handful of cash. The world kept turning, and the case was closed. A life for a life. A simple enough trade if you looked at it that way. But the numbers didn't add up. A woman with a head full of knowledge and a future that stretched across oceans. Her life ending on the floor of a house, covered by a mattress. And for what? A few bills and a couple of careless words. The world is a place where small things can become big, where a man's pride can outweigh a woman's future. The lesson, if there was one, was that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a stranger in the dark, but the quiet resentment of a man you paid to fix your wall. It's a grim truth, a final warning that a life's worth can sometimes be measured by the thing that finally brings it to a stop. And that's where we leave this story. It's a bitter one, but it's real. This is why we do what we do here on Beneath the Sandalwood Tree, to understand the darkness that lives just under the surface. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe in the importance of shining a light on these tragedies, please hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next case. And in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this case. Do you believe justice was served? What do you think is the real moral of the story?